Rachel Carlson is a successful writer who has received many literary awards. She writes fantasy novels. But Rachel's greatest joy is her son Thomas. Rachel's husband Brian is also a writer, but unfortunately no publisher has shown interest in his book yet. Thomas is not his biological child, but his stepson. The boy wanted his mother to play with him. Rachel asked her son to wait a few minutes until she finished the chapter. The boy went downstairs and made a sign on the refrigerator with magnet letters that read, "Thomas was here." Brian had to share some unhappy news with his wife. Rachel said she didn't get it right the first time either. Brian feels like Tabitha King. She is also a good writer, but everyone only knows her famous husband Stephen King. While Rachel was finishing the chapter, Thomas played on the balcony and then went outside to the pond. Brian secretly envies the success of his wife, an established writer. Rachel was cooking dinner, and Thomas was still playing near the pond. Rachel told her husband that dinner was ready. When she went outside and saw the open gate, she sensed something was wrong. Rachel called for her son, but he did not respond. Noticing Thomas's toy in the pond, Rachel immediately realized the worst had happened. There was nothing that could be done for Thomas. Rachel's life was divided into before and after. 8 months had passed since she lost her son. On the advice of her best friend, Sharon Winton, Rachel was going to move temporarily to a cottage on the coast in the village of Inganishcove to finish her book. She would go without Brian. Soon Rachel rented the cottage and settled into her new place, hoping that solitude would help her focus on the writing. Shortly before this, Rachel's doctor Robert Friedman advised her to take a course of sedatives, but she is unsure if that would help. Rachel and Brian have already decided to divorce, but only after her return. Brian is worried that Rachel has never once spoken about Thomas, keeping everything inside. The doctor believes that Rachel blames herself because she was the one who forgot to lock the gate. In the present, Rachel called Sharon and said that this secluded place was just what she needed. Sharon works at a newspaper, but her career is not going very well. During the day, Rachel decided to walk to the nearest town and ask the village residents for directions. That's how she met an elderly couple, Finley and Mary Murray. Finley is a retired police officer. Rachel headed to the town along the shore. Here by the ocean people live a measured life, without the hustle and bustle of big cities like London. Suddenly a woman told Rachel that her son was waiting for her on the swings. Seeing Rachel's confusion, the woman said that she must have been mistaken and that it was someone else's son. Rachel made a plan for the remaining chapters of her book and was getting ready to start writing when she suddenly heard Thomas's voice. She sees his image everywhere. Later, Rachel went for a boat ride near the coast. The big water didn't scare her at all. On the shore, Rachel photographed beautiful landscapes. Here, a person can feel solitude with nature and freedom. That same day she met a guy named Angus McCulloch, the lighthouse keeper. Rachel was surprised because she thought all lighthouses were already automated. Angus said that they were. Soon he would be leaving too. Rachel shared that she came here to study lighthouses for her book. Angus offered to have lunch together and chat, but she politely declined. In the coastal cottage, Rachel continued unpacking. She had brought her son's toys with her so she would always have a reminder of him. Suddenly she saw the message, "Don't forget to look behind you," on the child's board. Turning around, Rachel saw her reflection in the mirror. Picking up the board she had dropped, she found that there was no writing. Morning came, and Rachel still couldn't write a single line. Night fell again. Rachel fell asleep right at her desk, but was awakened by the sounds of Thomas's favorite toy. Suddenly she saw her son walking toward the water outside the window. Rachel followed Thomas and hugged him, begging not to leave. The son asked his mother to go with him and pushed her into the water. Rachel tried to swim up, but the son was pulling her down. She woke up in her bed and saw Thomas next to her. A moment later Rachel woke up again. Morning came. Rachel still couldn't continue writing. To distract herself, she decided to visit Angus at the lighthouse. He gladly agreed to give her a tour. Angus told Rachel about the area. They walked along the shore, feeling the fresh spray of the waves. Rachel asked Angus if he felt lonely working here. The guy replied that he liked the solitude. Rachel shared that she couldn't write anything at the moment. In the lighthouse, Rachel saw a beautiful painting on the wall. Angus said that his wife Kate painted it. At first she liked it here, but she couldn't handle the long isolation. The lighthouse fascinated Rachel. Angus told her everything about it. His father, grandfather and great-grandfather had all worked here. Angus couldn't just leave. At the top of the lighthouse with Angus, Rachel felt absolute freedom. Later, she gave Angus one of her books as a thank you for the tour. It was her first published novel. Rachel is trying to adapt to her new life. She spends time with Angus every day, and soon feelings spark between them. Calling Sharon, Rachel told her about the new friend. Rachel hasn't returned to writing yet, but she feels like she's on the right path. One day Rachel and Angus took a photo together. It reminded her of when she used to take pictures with her son. Angus sensed something was wrong. Rachel suddenly said that she needed to go. As Rachel walked past the local cemetery, she met a priest who invited her to come to the church service on Sunday. Rachel was unsure because she had lost her faith. Rachel decided to go into a cafe bar, where the same woman who had asked her about the sun earlier approached her. The woman told Rachel that she had forgotten to close the gate. These words brought her back to that terrible day. Rachel hadn't been in that house since Thomas's demise. The woman continued telling Rachel that her son was nearby and that he followed her everywhere. Out of shock, Rachel dropped her glass and it shattered. Finley Murray helped her, saying that the woman was crazy. Rachel only now noticed that the crazy woman had left her an address on a napkin. Morag McPherson makes dolls and is currently talking to an imaginary interlocutor. Rachel knocked on her door but no one opened. Morag told the invisible interlocutor that she couldn't save Rachel. Returning to her cottage on the coast, Rachel saw the message "Thomas was here" on the refrigerator, made of magnet letters. Rachel could no longer stay in the house and went to Angus. After hearing her out, he said that he didn't know if the dead could contact those they loved. No one knows. Rachel blames herself. If she had gone out to play with her son as she had promised, nothing bad would have happened. Rachel thought that in a new place she could let go of the past. However, it didn't help. Angus comforted Rachel, and then he couldn't resist and kissed her. Passion arose between them. In the morning, Angus told Rachel that he had just finished reading her book yesterday. To inspire Rachel, Angus carved a small boat out of wood for her. Angus also left Rachel a key so she could come to the lighthouse whenever she wanted. Later they took a walk along the coast. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there would be a celebration for Mary Murray's birthday in the village, and Rachel invited Angus to go with her. He gladly agreed. For the first time in months, Rachel felt happy. Returning to the cottage on the coast, she saw that the magnet letters on the refrigerator were in random order. Rachel threw away the sheets with her book plan and began writing straight from her head. The words formed sentences by themselves. On Sunday, Rachel visited the church after all. Soon Mary's birthday was celebrated. Rachel gave the birthday girl a gift. The guests were having fun. Time passed but Angus still hadn't shown up. Rachel waited for him, occasionally glancing at the clock. Finley congratulated his beloved wife on her birthday. The guests were about to eat the cake. Rachel asked a woman if she had seen Angus McCulloch here. Upon hearing this, all the guests became alarmed. Puzzled, Rachel described what Angus looked like. It turned out that he had passed away 7 years ago, as had his wife. At first Rachel thought it was a silly joke, but it quickly became clear that it wasn't. The priest confirmed that Angus had been perished for many years and that the lighthouse had long been operating automatically. In complete confusion, Rachel left. The guests were equally puzzled. Rachel returned to the lighthouse. The key Angus had left was gone, but the door opened by itself. Rachel went inside calling for Angus. It was clear that no one had lived here for a long time. Could solitude have driven Rachel mad? But then how could she know about Angus and his wife? Rachel was startled by Finley, who came because he was worried about her. According to Finley, 7 years ago he went to the lighthouse as he often did. There, Finley found Kate lifeless. It turned out that Angus had returned earlier than expected and caught his wife in the arms of a local fisherman, Gordon MacLeod. Angus stepped off from a great height, after having taken the lives of Kate and her lover. Rachel continued to insist that she knew Angus personally. As proof, Rachel wanted to show Finley the photos she had taken with Angus, but the film was missing from the camera, as was the boat-shaped souvenir. It turned out that the house Rachel is currently renting was where Gordon MacLeod lived. Each time Kate signaled him with lights about her husband's departure. Rachel found a photo of Kate and Gordon together. It didn't make sense to Rachel, as she had seen Angus every day for a month. To convince Rachel definitively, Finley advised her to visit Angus's grave at the cemetery. Rachel no longer knew what to believe. The priest didn't know how to help her. Rachel went to the archive to find a newspaper from February 12 or 13, 1998. Unfortunately, there were no newspapers. The computer was under repair, so there was no internet access either. Rachel needed at least one photograph of Angus, and the archive staff advised her to go to the library. However, the library wouldn't be open until Monday. Calling Sharon, Rachel told her everything that had happened. All of Angus's things had disappeared, as if he had never been in her life. Maybe Rachel should have listened to the doctor and taken the medication? Sharon was going to be on the next flight to see her friend. Rachel feels like she is slowly going crazy in this house. At night, she tried to work on her book again, but it went nowhere. Suddenly she noticed a light signal at the lighthouse and immediately headed there. She was startled by a sudden noise. But it was just the wind opening the door. Rachel climbed to the very top and saw Angus. Sharon, who had already arrived, was urging her friend to come down. Rachel assured her that Angus had just been on the balcony and then disappeared. However, Sharon saw no one. Suddenly Rachel noticed Angus behind and asked her friend to turn around, But Sharon thought Rachel was just having a nervous breakdown due to grief. Angus was approaching. When Sharon finally turned around, she said there was no one here. Seconds later, Angus, holding a sharp object, took her life right in front of Rachel. Rachel, in fear, ran out of the lighthouse and rushed to the bar cafe for help. Finley didn't want to go with her, but he had no choice. However, there were no signs of Sharon or a struggle at the lighthouse. Rachel couldn't understand anything since her friend had been here just recently. Finley was sure that Rachel's friend was now at home and perfectly fine, and everything else was just a product of a sick imagination. Rachel couldn't reach Sharon by phone, but that didn't mean she had been here. Finley decided it would be better for Rachel to spend the night at his and his wife's house. In one of Rachel's books, a similar plot unfolded. The heroine fell in love with a ghost. Rachel denied that she was going insane and refused to stay at the Murray's house. For hours she unsuccessfully tried to reach Sharon. Then Rachel called her doctor, Robert Friedman, and tried to explain that Sharon was in trouble. Rachel wanted Robert to go check on Sharon right now. Robert was lazy because he was about to have dinner with friends at a restaurant, but Rachel insisted. However, Robert was not in a hurry to do as she asked. Suddenly, one of Thomas's toy remote-controlled cars started moving on its own. Rachel came to Morag McPherson's house. It turned out she had the gift of clairvoyance. According to Morag, Rachel's son wants to warn her about something. Those who voluntarily pass away, like Angus, are doomed to wander between the world of the living and the dead forever. Morag advised Rachel to leave the island right now and never return. Before that, Rachel wants to pick up her son's things. On the way, she called Robert, who said he hadn't been to see Sharon yet. Rachel hung up. Robert decided to call Brian to talk about Rachel's strange behavior. Robert didn't know that Brian was in the coastal cottage rented by Rachel at that moment. He took a blank sheet and put it into his wife's typewriter. Angus, whose real name was Patrick, and Sharon met. It turned out they were in cahoots with Brian. Sharon and Brian had long envied Rachel's success and money. Now they wanted to take everything that belonged to her, but they needed a helper. Their main task was to make Rachel look insane in the eyes of the villagers. Patrick claimed he hadn't improvised and wasn't on the lighthouse balcony when Rachel supposedly saw him. It was also unclear who left the message on the fridge from Thomas. Sharon suspected that Patrick had fallen in love with Rachel, though he denied it. The desire to get as much money as possible was what united them. Patrick and the others had carefully planned everything. That night he was supposed to take a train and leave, to later receive part of Rachel's money that Brian would inherit. However, memories of Rachel made him change his mind. Rachel returned to the coastal cottage. She was very scared, convinced that she was being haunted by ghosts. Any strange sound made her flinch. Suddenly she saw a typed note on a sheet of paper: "Don't mourn me. Gone to be with Angus." At that moment Brian attacked her from behind, knocking her out. Sharon was already here too. They didn't know that Patrick had changed his plans. He found the film he had earlier stolen from Rachel's camera. Patrick had indeed fallen in love with her. Suddenly he saw a light at the lighthouse and headed there to save Rachel. At that moment, music turned on by itself and the lights began to flicker. Something was approaching Patrick. Meanwhile, the Murray couple was watching an old horror movie. It was almost midnight when there was a knock on the door. Morag was standing on the doorstep, saying that Rachel needed help. Finley wanted to ignore this mad woman, but his wife reminded him that the last time they didn't listen to Morag, it ended in a funeral. Meanwhile, Brian and Sharon were about to throw the unconscious Rachel into the water. The villagers considered her insane and would surely think she voluntarily passed away. The plan seemed perfect. Suddenly Sharon noticed someone at the lighthouse. At that moment Rachel regained consciousness. Brian and Sharon realized that Patrick hadn't taken the train, but there was no turning back. Seeing Rachel trying to reach for the chain key, Brian quickly threw her into the water and told Sharon not to look. Now they had to deal with Patrick. Rachel tried to swim up, but the chains were dragging her down. As she was losing consciousness, she heard her son's voice saying, "Don't forget to look behind you." Turning around, Rachel saw the keys, which had also fallen into the water. That's how she saved herself. Sharon didn't like the lighthouse because it was a creepy place. What if the village stories were true and Angus's ghost lived on the island? Suddenly Rachel attacked those she once considered her close people. Neutralizing Sharon, she ran upstairs, with Brian chasing after her. At that moment, someone lowered the hook that had caused Gordon's demise 7 years ago. Patrick, or Angus, in Patrick's body came out to Brian. He took Brian's life. Finley had already arrived at the lighthouse. At the same moment, Angus and Rachel came face to face at the lighthouse. He silently expressed his love to Rachel and took a step down. Rachel couldn't stop him. Returning inside, she saw Brian lifeless. Finley saw it too. Some time passed. Rachel was acquitted in court. She returned to Ingonish Cove to pick up her things. Finley wished her luck. Morag also came to see Rachel off, saying that her son wouldn't want her to grieve for long. The women hugged. Rachel left these places forever and returned to her home, once the scene of tragedy. But now Rachel was ready to let go of the past and start a new life. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.